It's time for Remodel Revolution. And now, an award-winning contractor with over 40 years experience. Here is Alex Guthrie.
Welcome to another episode of Remodel Revolution. We're coming to you from the world headquarters of Remodel Revolution, from deep in the heart of the great state of Texas. I'm your host, Alex Guthrie. We have an incredible show today. We're going to talk with an engineer. We're going to find out why homeowners kind of have a breakdown when they hear the word engineer, kind of like when they hear the word dentist. We're also going to have a friend of the show, a lady that I just adore, Bess Dixon, she's a realtor, and we're going to talk about relocating and numbers and things like that are happening locally. So stay tuned and we'll be right back. Sometimes when I say the word engineer to a homeowner, they look at me like I just told them they had to go have their teeth pulled at the dentist. That's sort of the reaction I get half the time. But I have to tell you that I've learned over the years that an engineer is really our best friend on a remodel project, particularly during certain stages of it. It's taken me forever to find an engineer willing to show his face on this show. I don't know why, but I finally found a guy, a guy that I work with an awful lot, Jason Conklin with Lighthouse Engineering.
Yes, sir.
Yes. Jason is a structural
Forensic
engineer. Sorry, that's a new one to me, so I forgot that. But at any rate, welcome to the show. How are you?
Good. I'm so glad to be here.
That's
busy
awesome.
as can be, which is
yeah,
like everybody right now.
Right. So a lot of the questions that I get from people, or the reactions I get from homeowners in particular, is because they've always been told that, man, when you get an engineer in there, it's going to cost you a ton of money. They're going to over-engineer everything. The materials are going to go up, the labor's going to go up, and then you got to pay the engineer. I have found that, in my view, that actually saves them money maybe 10 years down the road, sometimes not even that long, because you're doing things the way they ought to be done. And so tell us some of the things that you do as an engineer that benefit the homeowner and the builder.
So we're always, from an engineering standpoint, I'm always trying to make the process go smoother. I want to make the permitting go smoother with the city. I want to make the inspections go smoother, whether it's from the engineering side or from the actual city side. But I also want to make sure that the project is as safe as can be. We never try to over-engineer anything, but we always follow the minimal building code for whatever project it is. But then you also get the benefit of the on-site inspections from the engineer as well. Mm-hmm.
So there's a process involved when you're going to engineer, let's just say a foundation. Kind of walk through, people don't always understand why it costs the money that it costs, to get the engineer plan, but also the time it takes to get it and the benefit of it. So let's start with foundation, because that's usually the first thing. Probably Jason does more foundation. More people call him up because they have cracks in the walls. And in the state of Texas, that's a normal thing. Mm-hmm. But let's talk a little bit about your process that you go through. Let's say I call you up and I say, hey, I need you to engineer a foundation for a house for me.
Okay. So if it's new construction or additions, we go through a process that's to perform an on-site inspection to figure out what you've got, what your existing structure looks like. Is it capable of handling an addition, which most of them are. But sometimes the cities require a specific look from an engineer or a letter saying, hey, I've looked at it, the existing foundation is capable of handling an addition. And then from there, I usually recommend getting a set of plans from either an architect or a designer. You do not always need a certified architect. Certified architects charge a lot more than designers do, but I think their set of plans is typically about on par with most designers. And I work with quite a few designers that they understand the building process. They're not going to over design something that can't be constructed or be engineered. And then once those set of plans are acquired, I usually get those plans and review them and then basically make the engineering work from the engineering side. But prior to doing all of that, I have to do a proposal setup where once I review the plans, I can basically say, okay, I think it's going to cost X to do the design. But during that design phase, you get a lot of different things from the engineer as well. You get the on-site inspections, you get revisions to plan sets, you get working with the city, calling the city. I usually will always ask for whoever the city inspector is.
And regarding the city, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but regarding the city, the engineers actually kind of outweigh the city will always rely on the engineers, what I'm trying to say. They will always rely on your letter first.
Yes. Yeah. So our engineering letters or engineering stamp and seal supersedes, goes above any kind of inspector, whether it be an inspector from a city or a home inspector or even like a third-party inspector that comes out to look at whatever.
But that puts a lot of responsibility on your shoulders. I mean, you have to be very precise and you have to be very careful that you're making the right recommendation.
Oh, absolutely. But again, we're following the building code, and every city follows and adopts a certain building code, but then they can also modify it. So the building code is just a minimal set of regulations.
So a lot of times I'll call Jason and I'll be in the middle of a project, and I may have I've been doing this all my life. I pretty well know what I need to do, but I've become very reliant on Jason and other engineers to come in and sort of bless what I'm doing. I might put in a beam or I might make a change somewhere, and I'll just call them and say, hey, come take a look at this, and just in case, let's make sure. And every now and then he'll say, maybe we need to add a little to this or add a little to that. That's your job.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. And so what it does for the homeowner is it provides a safe environment for them, structurally sound environment. And so we started out talking about the foundation. So when you do a foundation, you're dealing with soil conditions. And in this part of the world, soil conditions vary greatly just in the North Texas region.
Very true.
What is the process that you would recommend to a builder? Let's just say he's building a new house and he or she says to you, I need this engineered foundation. What's the first thing you tell them?
The first thing I tell them, the first thing I ask them is, where's the home going to be located, so I can get a general idea of what the soil is like.
Because you kind of have a map that shows you different soil conditions in different areas.
Yeah, and generally in the North Texas area and through the I-35 corridor down towards San Antonio, the soils are going to be highly expansive clay soils. And so they shrink and swell kind of like a sponge whenever you add water to it, and then it shrinks back to kind of a smaller version of the original sponge. But as you go further west, you start getting into rockier, sandier ground, and so the soil is different. So I always ask that first. And then secondly...
And then when you go east, it turns into sandy loam.
Yeah, and the...
Quicksand.
Yeah, and I always say if you see pine trees, you're going to see sand. Pine trees do not like the acidity of clay soil, so they avoid it. So that's why you typically don't see pine trees until you get further east of the Metroplex. But the next step I always insist on is a soils report of some kind. So a geotechnical engineer is a type of engineer that deals with soils, and they will do soil samples that will tell you, hey, at so many feet deep, we've got a water table that we have to deal with, or we have a certain type of soil until we hit 10 feet deep or whatever it is. So that is probably the largest component that helps aid with my type of design, because that soils engineer will very clearly in that report state, hey, we recommend this type of foundation.
So you've got a soils report, and then you've got a structure, you've got a plan that says we're going to do this type structure, 1-story, 2-story, 3-story, whatever it is. And you then have to engineer that foundation to support that structure, but the foundation has to be supported by the ground underneath it.
Correct.
And that's where you get into different soil treatments, you might get into piers, you might get into a different type of foundation. So that's where your real value comes in, is putting all that together so that once I've poured that foundation, I don't have to worry about what I'm putting on top of it.
That's the idea, is I don't want to hear from you ever again, generally speaking.
Well, you're not the first one to tell me that.
That's the collective you. I mean, I don't want to ever hear from anybody, at least not for that.
Well, thank you. I feel better now. How many different kinds of, what are different types of engineers people will encounter in residential?
Primarily, you're going to just encounter what's known as a civil engineer, and that's what I am by degree, civil engineer. And civil engineers are the types of engineers that design structures and things that you see just driving around or looking around in the city or wherever you are, buildings, roads, bridges, and then things that you don't see, like sanitary sewer systems, drainage systems, and environmental systems that help
That's
with
one
things
of the
like that.
things that I've learned as a young contractor that I never knew. Of course, one of the things that we deal with around here and in a lot of places is water flow, and it's things that affect the foundation. It's ways of controlling things. It's understanding how to maybe slow down how the water's flowing so it gets where you want it to get and doesn't overtax the drain. And there's all sorts of things that you look at that are a lot more interesting than, well, water goes downhill. It's how fast does it go downhill and how much of it's going downhill. And this applies to gutters, parking lots. I've had to do all kinds of things. And then a great engineer would come up with a really innovative idea to control these things. So you're an idea guy. You're a designer as well as just as the structural meat and bones kind of person.
Yes, yeah. Water control, water flow is probably the number one item of importance for a civil engineer is where is water going to go? Because water affects everything that we do on the site. It affects the foundation, and like you said, it affects the overall drainage, the erosion of the soils, the retaining walls. It affects parking lots. It affects how your gutters react around
Soil expansion.
Yes, sir.
All these things that we talk about that we have to deal with that actually cause that callback that you don't
that
want.
I don't want. Yeah. That's true.
So you have a civil engineer, and is that the same as a structural engineer, or so
Yeah.
you're all, it's all kind of one type of.
Yeah, there's like your main bullets, like your main bullet would be civil engineering, and underneath it is structural engineering and forensic engineering, and then you've got soils engineer, which is geotechnical, and then you've got environmental engineers, and then you'd have another bullet that's like mechanical engineer, and they deal
Right.
with the mechanicals of the structure itself.
Man, that's a lot to do. So you've looked at a lot of houses,
I have.
and tell us some of the things that you are used to seeing, like if maybe a homeowner calls you up with a crack in the wall, or maybe a big sag over the garage door, things like that. What are some of the things that you typically look for when you walk on their property?
So when I step foot on your property, I am looking at multiple things. So I am looking at drainage. I'm looking at the locations of existing trees and vegetation. I'm looking at how the house sits on the lot. So cut and fill lot, what do we have slopes wise? Do you have gutters? Do you not have gutters? Do you have a very poor layout of the actual structure itself? And then once I walk around the property, I'm looking for cracks and visual things. There are what are known as freeze board separations. Those are just specific separations right up at the top layer of the brick, and then cracks in the slab, of course. But then on the interior, of course, everybody's familiar with drywall cracks. So it's just part
So
of
you're
doing business.
looking for things that that maybe the homeowner doesn't see. No,
Correct.
this is what I do. You know, this is my value to my client is I go through there and I go, you may have a problem here, you may have a problem there, something we need to look at. And they're like, well, I never saw that. Well, one of the reasons you don't always see it is because you're used to seeing it. It's been there, but you just are used to seeing it. Not everything that you point out to somebody is a critical house going to fall down kind of thing.
No.
Or most of them just manageable, or how do you feel about that?
Most items are what we call cosmetic, just distress items. They're not necessarily anything to worry about. Probably 98% of all visual items that I see around a home are non-structural related. It's the smaller 2% that are concerned, but I've only condemned 2 houses in my career so far, and I've been doing this for the same company for 12 years and looked at probably about 20,000 homes. And, you know, for the most part, everything is either repairable or we do nothing.
Well, I always tell my clients or potential clients, I can fix anything.
Sure.
It's just how bad do you want to fix it, or how bad was it messed up? Because there's a lot of structures I look at, and I know you look at, that were built by people that really just didn't know what they were doing, or built during a time when there was literally no regulation on what they were doing, and they just didn't know better.
Yeah.
They weren't trying to do anything bad. They just didn't know a 2x6 wasn't big enough when you needed, where we would now use a 2x10 or 2x12. You know, we'd now use a larger piece. So let's talk a little bit about one of the things that I love, that I've seen over my career change so much, and that is engineered beams and some of the engineered products that we have available to us. That I was telling Jason before the show that I started out in a time when we didn't even have glue lamps. We had to take and glue up 2x12s and nail them and bolt them together to make the beams now that we can buy pre-engineered. And then we go replace the beams that we put in 20 or 30, not 20, but probably 30, 40 years ago.
Yeah, I've got quite a few options as far as being an engineer and what I can recommend for to come up with a solution for your issue. And so if you're removing a load-bearing wall, let's take a very simple scenario where you want to open up a 20-foot opening in your 1970s house that, you know, now you want it all to be one room. Well, instead of just specking out conventional lumber like you were familiar with doing, I've got glue lams. Glue lams are glued laminated engineered beams. So they're pre-manufactured, they're glued. They're basically made of conventional lumber like 2x6s or 2x8s. But those are a really easy option. They're easy to install. You can actually sand them up and stain them. They look really cool.
And they're rated to carry. So what you're doing when you take out a wall is you're making this expansive opening. And so you have to be able to support whatever's on top of it. Sometimes it's a second floor, sometimes it's a roof. And we used to have to we used a lot of steel.
Sure.
When you would get over 18 feet, we used to have to use a lot more steel than we use now. And that was, we still don't have to worry about those. That steel never quits working. But what Jason's referring to are engineered beams, which I love it because it allows me a lot more flexibility in the design and the alterations that people want me to do, which, like you say, are creating one big giant room, you know, removing load-bearing walls. And we can put these things up in the floors, up in where they're flush with the ceiling, where you can't see the beam.
Flush mount, yeah.
Sometimes you can't. Sometimes you have to put a larger beam in there that's going to show. What are some of the ways that you feel you most help builders and homeowners?
I think making the process go smoother as far as preventing any kind of like city intervention or you know, shutting the project down, that kind of thing. But at the same time, I mean, keeping the public safe from any kind of harm and making sure that structure is never going to have any issues. That's paramount, of course.
The most important part of it is the safety.
Absolutely.
And when you have building inspectors in your house looking at your project, that's their primary concern as well. That's what they're there for, is your safety. I really, really appreciate you coming in and,
Sure, thanks for
and
having me.
spending time with us today. That really, hopefully this will help people that are thinking, you know, we may need an engineer. maybe we'll call Jason. Jason's easy to work with, but thank you so much.
Yes,
And,
sir.
and we look forward to maybe doing this again sometime.
I would love it.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Alex.
We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to have our next segment. Stay tuned. Imagine this, a totally customized, organized, and beautiful master closet. A home office that fits right into a perfect space. A pantry designed specifically for your storage needs. Imagine your home totally organized. It's time to call the design professionals at Closets by Design DFW and turn your dreams into a reality. With a design staff over 30 strong, Closets by Design works directly with you to create your dream space, and they build it locally, helping support the DFW community. Check them out at dallas.closetsbydesign.com or call them at 972-361-0010. Use the promo code RRV to find out about the amazing specials and discounts available. That's dallas.closetsbydesign.com or call them at 972-361-0010. And don't forget that promo code RRV, Closets by Design. It's only a few short weeks until we'll be running our air conditioners all day and all night. Hey, it's time to get an HVAC tune-up scheduled. Call my friends at Total Air and Heat in Plano, Texas at 972-881-0020 right now and get on the schedule for a tune-up, and don't wait for the long lines. Get ahead of the crowd now. Total Air has been servicing the North Dallas, Plano, and Richardson areas for over 60 years. Steve and Justin Lawton sell and service Carrier brand heating and cooling systems with Green Speed Intelligence technology. So give them a call at 972-881-0020 or contact them at totalair.com today. Well, the migration hasn't stopped. All I see from every newscast has how people are bailing out of East Coast and West Coast cities and heading to the Lone Star State. And so I have my very good friend and a relocation specialist, Bess Dixon. Hello, Bess.
Hello, Alex. How are you today?
I'm fantastic. How are you? It's so good to
Fantastic.
see you.
Another day in paradise. We're here in
Another
Texas.
day in yeah, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. We are still experiencing this huge relocation, migration. The longer they keep those other poor folks shut down and they start reading the headlines, Texas is open. I imagine it's going to even, it's interesting. I was talking to a lady in San Francisco and a young woman, and she said, my husband and I, we're really thinking about moving to Dallas. And I was real surprised by that. She's got a great job, but she just can't take it anymore. She's just like, she said, all of our friends are going to Texas. We're going to get out of here and go. Tell us about your business. Tell us about what you do and how many calls you're getting for people moving here.
It's believe the headlines. It's real. This weekend, I spent with 3 different clients, 2 from California, 1 stepping in their toe, just doing a trial run of Texas, coming in from New York. And the things that they're interested in, the properties they're interested, just run the gamut. It's very, very interesting. One couple in particular, they've decided, after having grown up in LA, that they
Wow,
now
that's a shocker.
that
coming to
they now want to live. This is even more of a shocker. They want to live the Texas farm life. He
They've been watching too much YouTube,
right.
man.
I don't. But it's a great story because he just as a young child, grew up reading Hank the Cowdog books. Which anybody that's been in West
Hank the
Texas,
Cowdog?
Hank the Cowdog, and anyone that
Oh,
has ever
Hank. Hank. Oh, yeah, Hank. I thought you said Hank.
No,
Hank.
No. We don't hate
Hank,
here. We're
Hank the
Texans. We don't hate.
Cowdog.
We know. No. Hank. And I can't do his drawl. But he grew up reading Hank the Cowdog, and he basically wants to. And it was cute because he started describing this piece of property that he wants to find, and all these things. And then his wife is like, "Well, I just want some chickens."
Did you tell him that if he has a cow dog, he's got to have cows?
That's right.
They're not worth much without cows.
Right. Well, and here's a fun little aside, and that is their cousin, when he heard that they were going to Texas for the long weekend, just to kind of kick the dirt, so to speak, decided to come along too.
Really?
And basically, he was unabashed in his statement of, I just wanted to get out of California and remember what freedom feels like.
Right.
And speaking of cows, on one of the properties we looked at, the neighbors had some very friendly brown cows, and the cousin was just thrilled because wife and husband are out just kind of walking the land, and he happened to be standing near the barbed wire fence, and over comes a cow that kind of nudged him, and oh my gosh, he started to be like, this is the land, y'all need to buy this land. And I think it was because of the cow that is the neighbor's cow that came over and said howdy.
Does he know that friendly cows become good steaks? At
That's
some
right.
point?
You understand, Big Mac just nudged you, right?
Don't fall in love with him. You'll be eating him before you know. Okay, I won't go there.
Yeah, but it's fun. It's a privilege to be an ambassador currently to the world for Texas. It's one of my most favorite parts of my job.
It's just got to be so much fun. Mm-hmm. And the interesting thing in the conversation I had I was telling you about with the young lady in San Francisco, they look at our prices, and she said, "Man, we can, with this little garage apartment we're living in, we can sell this thing and we can get a really big house in Dallas." Is that true?
That is true, but I have found to set everyone up for success, it is best to introduce the concept of Texas property taxes as soon and early in the process as possible, because that is often where people get sticker shock. Texas, we're very much a hard work, hard play state. Keep it simple, be direct. And so along those lines, we don't have a bunch of sneaky taxes that bite you in the tushy. We have just one major tax, which is property taxes. And they in North Texas, they average right now about $2.81 per $100 of value.
Wow, that's high.
But it does vary depending on the municipality and the other items that might make up the property tax, like a mud and a pit and all those letters of the alphabet that mean more money out of your pocket.
Right. Well, only if you want trash pickup and water coming to your house.
Right.
Little things like that.
Right,
Or
little things, or like
decent
fire
school.
station, or
Yeah.
road. Speaking of my couple, they were like, "Oh my gosh, the roads around here have terrible potholes." I'm like, "Well, we're like 15 miles from the closest municipality, and it's a county that takes care of this." And they're like,
Well, and we
can't
just
you
had
just call up?
that freeze really tore them up. So what they'll find is that roads that are covered in tar don't last really good in the occasional freeze that we have. But they'll get used to it. Just
They'll
get a
get used to
4-wheel
it,
drive,
right.
man. You'll be okay.
Right.
You know, you want to be a rancher. If
There
your
you go.
truck doesn't squeak a little bit, everybody knows you're a newbie.
Right? It was cute because they're like, "Okay, so this is why you wanted us to leave the meet and leave the rental car in the parking lot and hop in your Jeep." And I was like, "Yes, this is why, because these things happen, potholes, other
So
things."
let's talk about corporate reloads.
Yes.
How's that? Is there still this big giant move coming this way? This tsunami?
There is. It actually, the blessing in COVID, if there is a blessing in COVID, was that it did kind of settle out a little bit. And now it's not so much of a tsunami as it is a ripple. I have several corporate relocation clients that we started the process about this time last year. And then due to COVID shifting COVID regulations with the company that they were relocating with, their move to Texas shifted. Like they were going to be here in November, and then no, it's this year. And I mean, those sorts of things.
It's more controlled.
So now, and which is a blessing, because now it's much more of a process and not so much of a panic attack. You've got to be here tomorrow.
Right. It's not a fire drill.
Which actually opens up the options for relocation, because now, especially this one couple, we were able to go new home route versus a previously owned route, because now we had time for them to put a contract on a house and then have it built in 8 to 9 months, which is kind of what builders are doing now. On a side note, any builder that says they can do it in 6 months, they're stretching the truth a lot, because
Only by about 6 months.
Right.
But, well, I was going to ask you on pricing on new homes, because what we're experiencing are these just massive price increases in material. One of my electricians called me and told me that the price of a roll of wire went up, I think he said $63 a roll last week. Now that's something that you would go to Home Depot and buy for $35. Now it's $100, right? And so this at some point has to have a big impact, not only on the price of housing, but the ability of builders to make a profit, which is going to slow down the development. Are we able to keep up our stock? That's the question.
That's what the major building suppliers are doing their darndest. I mean, both of us have probably chatted with our buddies that are in the business, doors and windows and millwork and the whole package. They're doing the best they can. It's just the old economic cycle of demand and supply. Right?
Is it a new normal? That's the question. The question is it a new normal where the price of everything is just going up, almost like inflation?
I think we're going to settle out at a higher than previous normal, but I think this is a bubble. I think this is a little speed bump as everybody readjusts. I mean, at the end of the day,
we hope you're
still
right, because it's not unusual in the building industry that a certain part of the year prices go up, and then usually when you get to the summer or you get to the supposed big bill, which we've had like for 3 years now, I mean, 4 years, whatever. Everything's been going crazy, never slowed down. But usually when you get to a certain part of the year, it sort of catches up and levels out, and actually prices will go down normally. I don't know if we're in normal times anymore.
Yeah, I think it'll settle down. I don't know if we'll ever be as low as we were. No.
What are the reactions you're getting from people about Texas opening up, potential customers? What are they saying to you?
The ones that are coming in celebrate it. They celebrate it.
They're not afraid.
I don't know. I think everybody is more like a eyes wide open. Let's be mindful. I mean, what I'm hearing is that the safety protocols are now a habit, and they're going to continue that habit. But they do like the concept that Texas is pushing forth, which is let's have everybody be adult of themselves. Like we, the state, do not want to be adult/parent of you. We want you to be adult of you. We want you to be parent of you.
Which is exactly what a lot of us felt we should have heard a year ago. Although I'm thankful for the information, I understand it was serious and all that, but I don't need Big Daddy telling me to wear a mask. I can figure that one out on my own. But we are where we are. But what's interesting about all of this, I spent a lot of time in East Texas, in small town. And small town East Texas has not ever really abided by COVID restrictions. I mean, they haven't masked. And if you go to Walmart, where you inevitably do, if you live in a small town, you wear a mask. If you go to certain restaurants, you wear a mask. The wait staff wear a mask. There's some social distancing. But about 6 months ago, they had enough. And they just went, we're done.
Well, not even just East Texas. You go to Wild Wild West Texas, same thing.
Yeah, and so very independently minded people that have no intention at all of having the government tell them what they've got to do.
Well, if you've survived in a land like in West Texas, it's tumbleweeds and,
Yeah.
and not much water or
Rattlesnakes,
anything, it's a
man.
rattlesnakes.
Yeah.
You're like, you know, you've
So
seen
the-
worse.
The interesting thing for me was I decided I track the numbers on the internet. I track the numbers of the small towns, and so the little town I'm in, I go and I check the numbers on the county of how many people had COVID for in the last month, how many cases, how many deaths. 0. This thing started, I was really surprised to see that. But they have, once they quit worrying about it, it's almost like it ran its course and then it got through. Now, you know, I'm not predicting anything. That could all change now that there's a lot, even less, well, 0 restrictions at this point. But I think it's pretty interesting, the difference between, and if you're in a East Coast city, West Coast city that has you convinced that even if you're asymptomatic, you're a carrier, you know, they have you convinced that.
I'm not a scientist, so I'm not even going to go down that path.
No, I'm not.
Sorry.
But the reason I brought that up wasn't to predict anything, or I shouldn't have brought it up. Probably I'll get hate mail. But how do people that are coming from those places feel when they get here? That was my whole point. That was supposed to be my whole point. And I think that they're probably feeling, like you say, like they're out of prison, at least for the duration. So you have people coming from LA, you have people coming from New York City. Is there a difference in their approach to moving to Texas?
Different? What a great question. Difference in their approach. I suppose so. Of course, profiling is illegal. We shouldn't be doing that. But in general, in general terms,
Careful, you might get canceled.
New York they tend to be a little bit more distrustful and demanding, if that sounds right. And California tends to be more like relieved. They're used to sunshine, so they enjoy the sunshine. They're, especially
A little more laid back, maybe.
a little bit more laid back, maybe a little bit more of a curious mind. Not so much of a, I don't know, they know everything.
Right. Yeah.
I know, you're
yeah.
dragging me into some scary places.
Man, you just went there. I do have your email address, right? Okay. Let me give you Bessie. Bessie's email address is the complaint line.
That's right. Well, overall, let's face it. I mean, Texas, thanks to the news, the media, people have a very particular view of what Texas is, right? And so people that respond to that are going to probably be a little bit different than like the average citizen in
I mean,
the
some
States, right?
of them you just have to say, look, you need to go to Austin.
Careful. I'll just say this, and that is, if you're coming here because you're drawn to, be it Dallas, the TV show, and what that ethos has developed in your mind, or whether you're drawn to what the news is not saying about Texas and you're curious, regardless, when you come, if you come with an open attitude, I mean, our overall Texas spirit is let's work hard, let's play hard, let's all be adults of ourselves, and let's come together as a community. Overall, that's what Texas is all about. And if that speaks to you, come on down. If you come down and then you discover that you don't like having neighbors that want to say howdy and bring you bread and cookies and things like that, then I would just ask you, please, nicely, and this is as controversial as I get, go away, go back. We like being who we are, and we like you coming and joining us.
Yeah.
If you want to
okay.
come and change us, please stay put.
Yeah,
I guess is really.
I've had that conversation with some people. Leave that stuff at home.
That's right.
That's
Yes.
right. That's
I
right.
mean, and not judging, you are allowed to choose what you want. Just don't choose for me what my state should be doing.
Well, it's a wonderful place, and being born and raised right here in Big D. And spending my-
Lucky you.
pretty
I only
much-
got here as quick as I could.
Yeah. But it worked.
It did.
Yeah,
It did. I grew up in Florida, and when I had a major life change and challenge, my mom was like, "So are you going to be coming back home?" Because and I was like, "But I am home," and she was shocked. She's like, "Texas is home," and I said, "I've been here for over 25 years, and the Florida that I grew up in is not a Florida I recognize anymore."
Really.
And Texas actually reminds me very much of the Florida I grew up in, because Florida, when I was growing up, was a huge agricultural state. People think of it as just Disney and beaches, but when I was growing up, it was the third largest.
They have cows there?
It was the third largest dairy state in the country, actually, when I was growing up in Florida. And obviously, one of the largest in citrus. Not so much the case now, but
No. That's everything's changed. It's all changed, and it continues to change. And what I was going to say is, having been born and raised here, it's still a wonderful place. I've seen all the change. I could go days, and we could talk about that, but it's still a wonderful place with wonderful people and a very welcoming group. Thank you so much for coming in and spending time with me and our
Absolutely.
audience
Thank
today.
you for
It's
the
always
invite.
fun. It's always great information. And we'll do it again. We'll keep doing this because you're awesome. Thank you so much.
thank you, Alex.
That's
Thank you.
Beth Dixon. Contact her if you're relocating to Big D. Her information will be up on the screen. Thank you so much for joining us today. Check out all of our social media, YouTube and Facebook. Subscribe and share YouTube. Like us on Facebook. Check us out on Texas Weather Tracker TV. We're on Roku, Android, Apple, and Amazon TV. Saturdays, 1 and 3 p.m. Central Standard Time.
Easy for you to say.
Easy for me to say. Have a wonderful day. Until next week, this is Alex Guthrie signing off. Thank you.
The views and opinions of this program are for educational and entertainment purposes only and are not intended to replace the recommendations of a hired professional. You can catch Remodel Revolution anytime. Follow the show on the website, remodelrevolutionradio.com, or on social media, Facebook, Instagram, and Pinterest, using the handle @Remodel Revolution Radio. You can always listen to the show on iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, and TuneIn, and watch the show anytime on YouTube.